peace be with you. One of the greatest gifts that God gave early Muslims was unity. Before God gave them this gift, they were just a bunch of Arab tribes roaming around the Arabian Peninsula, and they were of no consequence. They were absolutely irrelevant by any stretch of imagination. Nobody feared them, nobody respected them, nothing. However, after God gave them this gift, they became a force to be reckoned with, and they could finally make their own decisions and rule themselves. God invites us to remember this in the 3rd chapter of the Quran, verses 102 and 103. We are told, "O you who believe, be careful of your duty to God with the care that is due to Him, and do not die unless you are in submission to God, unless you are obedient to God, Muslims. And hold on to the rope of God altogether, and do not be disunited. And remember the favor of God on you when you were enemies. Then He united your hearts, so by His favor you became brethren. And you were on the brink of the pit of fire, then He saved you from it. Thus does God make clear His communications to you, that you may follow the right way." So these verses are a reminder of the gift that God gave us, but also an invitation to not divide ourselves, a command not to divide ourselves. So when God says, hold on to the rope of God, that is the Quran. That is the behaviors that we are commanded to live by. We are commanded to live by these certain rules, and we are commanded to be very predictable in our behavior. For us to have unity, you have to have something in common. People have to behave the same. They first have to believe the same, but moreover, they have to behave the same. If you say you believe in the Quran, but you don't talk like the Quran commanded you to talk, and you don't behave like the Quran commanded you to behave, then you're not holding on to the rope of God, nor are you being careful of your duty to God with the care that is due to God. And when that happens, all you get is division. Look at the Middle East. You guys are on the brink of the pit of fire again. Why? Because you are weak. Why are you weak? Because you are divided. Not only are your countries divided, but your minds are divided. So when something is happening to the Palestinian people, the Egyptians and the Saudis are like, well, that's happening to the Palestinians. That's not happening to us. These borders that were drawn after World War I and World War II, they're just artificial borders that divided your minds. And you are no longer looking at these people as your brothers. You are looking at them as somebody else. Whereas if somebody invaded California here, we would all go to war. They didn't invade California, they invaded America. So you're going to get colonized. And you are as weak as people before Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, were. Because you allowed yourself to be divided. And why did you allow yourself to be divided? Because you basically abandoned the Quran. You abandoned the book of God. You did not hold on to the rope of God. The only power that you can have to free yourselves is unity. That is the truest of power. There is no power such as unity. And the only way to achieve that power is by holding on to the rope of God, going back to the origin and actually implementing everything that is important, and stop fighting about things that are not even mentioned in the Quran. And also clear your minds of the artificial borders that have been imposed in your own minds, and actually see the reality for what it is. You have been divided by people who wish to conquer you. People who have demonstrated amply that they are willing to unalive your children, to starve you, and if you think that they will do not to do to you what they're doing to the Palestinians, if they think it's necessary, you're absolutely out of your mind. They did it to the Native Americans. They did it to themselves repeatedly in Europe, and if you think that they will not do it to you just because you're Saudi or you're Egyptian, you are out of your mind. You are absolutely stupid. You cannot be that stupid. If you are a Muslim living in the Middle East, you really need to realize that you need to go back to the Quran, which you can actually read because you speak the language, and start to implement every single commandment that's in it. After you're done with that and you're successful, then you can move on to other things. But this is the mission. Hold on to the rope of God altogether and do not be disunited. Because once you go outside of the Quran and you start having these debates about these things, you got divided, now you got sectarianism, you got all these things. It's absolutely ridiculous. I am watching these Muslims in the Middle East destroy themselves by arguing about things that aren't even mentioned in the Quran and disagreeing on things. It's absolutely atrocious and sad to see that when you can actually read the language. The fact that I can't even read Arabic language and I can see what the Quran says, and I'm like, why are you guys doing this? So that is what God tells us in the Quran. Hold on to the rope of God altogether and do not be disunited. If there are people among you who are just demonizing others and talking bad about others who are from a different country or a different sect, these are your enemies. If you look at, for example, the Yinon plan, which is a plan written in the 1980s by one of the Zionists, they are going to seek to highlight your differences in order to divide you and get you fighting among yourselves. So that is part of their plan. So you have to counteract that plan by really rejecting anyone in your societies who is trying to highlight your differences instead of trying to highlight your similarities. So that's one thing. The second thing is you have to talk to each other like God told you to talk to each other. You can't have unity when you just demonizing each other and calling each other's name. That's not how Muslims are supposed to act, number one. And number two, you're just dividing yourselves. And number three, you have to act like God told you to act. This whole concept that I can be a Muslim and do whatever I want is ridiculous. A Muslim has a predictable behavior. Yeah, sure, we all make mistakes sometimes, but they are mistakes. It's not a pattern of life. So if your pattern of life is that, then you didn't achieve anything. You're a hypocrite and you are the source of division. So this is what the Quran teaches us. You're going to be destroyed if you are disunited, and you're going to be disunited if you do not hold on to the rope of Allah, which is the Quran, which is the behaviors that we are supposed to practice. If you don't wake up, it's the end. Just like Native Americans. Peace be with you.